Instrument.
She learned to play several musical instruments. She learned to play several musical instruments. The instrument was beautifully crafted and produced a rich sound. The instrument was beautifully crafted and produced a rich sound. They chose their instrument based on personal preference. They chose their instrument based on personal preference.
Piano.
She practiced the piano for 2 hours every day. She practiced the piano for 2 hours every day. The piano was tuned before the concert. The piano was tuned before the concert. They bought a grand piano for their music room. They bought a grand piano for their music room.
Guitar.
She played the guitar at the campfire. She played the guitar at the campfire. The guitar had 6 strings and a beautiful tone. The guitar had 6 strings and a beautiful tone. They learned to play guitar by watching online tutorials. They learned to play guitar by watching online tutorials.
Violin.
She took violin lessons from a professional musician. She took violin lessons from a professional musician. The violin was made by a famous Italian craftsman. The violin was made by a famous Italian craftsman. They played the violin in the school orchestra. They played the violin in the school orchestra.
Drums.
She played the drums in a rock band. She played the drums in a rock band. The drums were loud and energetic. The drums were loud and energetic. They set up the drums on stage before the performance. They set up the drums on stage before the performance.
Flute.
She played the flute in the school band. She played the flute in the school band. The flute produced a sweet, melodic sound. The flute produced a sweet, melodic sound. They learned to play the flute as part of their music education. They learned to play the flute as part of their music education.
Trumpet.
She played the trumpet in the brass section. She played the trumpet in the brass section. The trumpet added a bright, powerful sound to the music. The trumpet added a bright, powerful sound to the music. They practiced the trumpet every morning before school. They practiced the trumpet every morning before school.
Saxophone.
She played the saxophone in a jazz ensemble. She played the saxophone in a jazz ensemble. The saxophone had a smooth, expressive tone. The saxophone had a smooth, expressive tone. They chose the saxophone because they loved jazz music. They chose the saxophone because they loved jazz music.
Cello.
She played the cello in the string quartet. She played the cello in the string quartet. The cello produced deep, resonant sounds. The cello produced deep, resonant sounds. They carried the cello carefully to avoid damaging it. They carried the cello carefully to avoid damaging it.
Clarinet.
She played the clarinet in the wind ensemble. She played the clarinet in the wind ensemble. The clarinet required regular maintenance and cleaning. The clarinet required regular maintenance and cleaning. They learned to play the clarinet in secondary school. They learned to play the clarinet in secondary school.
Bass.
She played the bass guitar in the band. She played the bass guitar in the band. The bass provided the rhythm and foundation for the music. The bass provided the rhythm and foundation for the music. They bought an electric bass for their new band. They bought an electric bass for their new band.
Harp.
She played the harp at the wedding ceremony. She played the harp at the wedding ceremony. The harp created an ethereal, angelic sound. The harp created an ethereal, angelic sound. They admired the beautiful harp in the orchestra. They admired the beautiful harp in the orchestra.
Accordion.
She played the accordion at the folk music festival. She played the accordion at the folk music festival. The accordion added a traditional sound to the music. The accordion added a traditional sound to the music. They learned to play the accordion from their grandmother. They learned to play the accordion from their grandmother.
Organ.
She played the organ in the church every Sunday. She played the organ in the church every Sunday. The organ filled the cathedral with majestic music. The organ filled the cathedral with majestic music. They listened to the organ recital in the historic church. They listened to the organ recital in the historic church.
Trombone.
She played the trombone in the brass band. She played the trombone in the brass band. The trombone had a slide mechanism for changing pitch. The trombone had a slide mechanism for changing pitch. They practiced the trombone in the school music room. They practiced the trombone in the school music room.
Double bass.
She played the double bass in the orchestra. She played the double bass in the orchestra. The double bass was the largest instrument in the string section. The double bass was the largest instrument in the string section. They needed help to transport the double bass to the concert. They needed help to transport the double bass to the concert.
Oboe.
She played the oboe in the woodwind section. She played the oboe in the woodwind section. The oboe had a distinctive, reedy sound. The oboe had a distinctive, reedy sound. They learned to play the oboe at music college. They learned to play the oboe at music college.
Bassoon.
She played the bassoon in the symphony orchestra. She played the bassoon in the symphony orchestra. The bassoon produced deep, mellow tones. The bassoon produced deep, mellow tones. They chose the bassoon because of its unique sound. They chose the bassoon because of its unique sound.
Tuba.
She played the tuba in the marching band. She played the tuba in the marching band. The tuba provided the lowest notes in the brass section. The tuba provided the lowest notes in the brass section. They carried the heavy tuba during the parade. They carried the heavy tuba during the parade.
Ukulele.
She played the ukulele on the beach at sunset. She played the ukulele on the beach at sunset. The ukulele was small and easy to carry. The ukulele was small and easy to carry. They learned to play the ukulele during their holiday. They learned to play the ukulele during their holiday.
Banjo.
She played the banjo in a bluegrass band. She played the banjo in a bluegrass band. The banjo had a bright, twangy sound. The banjo had a bright, twangy sound. They strummed the banjo around the campfire. They strummed the banjo around the campfire.
Harmonica.
She played the harmonica while walking down the street. She played the harmonica while walking down the street. The harmonica was small enough to fit in her pocket. The harmonica was small enough to fit in her pocket. They learned to play the harmonica from online videos. They learned to play the harmonica from online videos.
Tambourine.
She shook the tambourine to keep the rhythm. She shook the tambourine to keep the rhythm. The tambourine added a percussive element to the music. The tambourine added a percussive element to the music. They played the tambourine during the folk song. They played the tambourine during the folk song.
Xylophone.
She played the xylophone in the school percussion ensemble. She played the xylophone in the school percussion ensemble. The xylophone produced bright, bell-like sounds. The xylophone produced bright, bell-like sounds. They used mallets to strike the xylophone bars. They used mallets to strike the xylophone bars.
Cymbals.
She crashed the cymbals together for dramatic effect. She crashed the cymbals together for dramatic effect. The cymbals added excitement to the musical climax. The cymbals added excitement to the musical climax. They used the cymbals sparingly in the composition. They used the cymbals sparingly in the composition.
Genre.
She preferred the classical genre of music. She preferred the classical genre of music. The genre of the song was difficult to categorize. The genre of the song was difficult to categorize. They explored different musical genres throughout their career. They explored different musical genres throughout their career.
Classical.
She listened to classical music while studying. She listened to classical music while studying. The classical concert featured works by Mozart and Beethoven. The classical concert featured works by Mozart and Beethoven. They attended a classical music festival in the summer. They attended a classical music festival in the summer.
Jazz.
She loved listening to jazz in the evening. She loved listening to jazz in the evening. The jazz club featured live performances every weekend. The jazz club featured live performances every weekend. They learned to play jazz piano from a local musician. They learned to play jazz piano from a local musician.
Rock.
She played rock music in her band. She played rock music in her band. The rock concert was loud and energetic. The rock concert was loud and energetic. They listened to classic rock from the 1970s. They listened to classic rock from the 1970s.
Pop.
She enjoyed listening to pop music on the radio. She enjoyed listening to pop music on the radio. The pop song became a hit and topped the charts. The pop song became a hit and topped the charts. They danced to pop music at the party. They danced to pop music at the party.
Blues.
She played blues guitar with great emotion. She played blues guitar with great emotion. The blues originated in the American South. The blues originated in the American South. They attended a blues festival featuring renowned musicians. They attended a blues festival featuring renowned musicians.
Country.
She listened to country music while driving. She listened to country music while driving. The country song told a story about rural life. The country song told a story about rural life. They went to a country music concert in Nashville. They went to a country music concert in Nashville.
Folk.
She played folk music on her acoustic guitar. She played folk music on her acoustic guitar. The folk festival celebrated traditional music and culture. The folk festival celebrated traditional music and culture. They learned folk songs from different countries. They learned folk songs from different countries.
Reggae.
She danced to reggae music at the beach party. She danced to reggae music at the beach party. The reggae rhythm was relaxed and laid back. The reggae rhythm was relaxed and laid back. They listened to reggae while relaxing in the garden. They listened to reggae while relaxing in the garden.
Hip-hop.
She enjoyed listening to hip-hop music. She enjoyed listening to hip-hop music. The hip-hop artist performed at the music festival. The hip-hop artist performed at the music festival. They learned about the history of hip-hop culture. They learned about the history of hip-hop culture.
Electronic.
She danced to electronic music at the nightclub. She danced to electronic music at the nightclub. The electronic music festival featured DJs from around the world. The electronic music festival featured DJs from around the world. They produced electronic music using computer software. They produced electronic music using computer software.
Opera.
She attended an opera performance at the theatre. She attended an opera performance at the theatre. The opera featured beautiful singing and elaborate costumes. The opera featured beautiful singing and elaborate costumes. They listened to Italian opera on the radio. They listened to Italian opera on the radio.
Soul.
She loved the emotional depth of soul music. She loved the emotional depth of soul music. The soul singer had a powerful, expressive voice. The soul singer had a powerful, expressive voice. They danced to classic soul songs at the wedding. They danced to classic soul songs at the wedding.
Funk.
She danced to funk music with its groovy bass lines. She danced to funk music with its groovy bass lines. The funk band had an infectious rhythm. The funk band had an infectious rhythm. They played funk music at the disco party. They played funk music at the disco party.
Metal.
She listened to heavy metal music. She listened to heavy metal music. The metal band performed with intense energy. The metal band performed with intense energy. They attended a metal concert at the arena. They attended a metal concert at the arena.
Punk.
She played punk music in a garage band. She played punk music in a garage band. The punk movement was known for its rebellious attitude. The punk movement was known for its rebellious attitude. They listened to classic punk from the 1970s. They listened to classic punk from the 1970s.
R&B.
She enjoyed listening to R&B music. She enjoyed listening to R&B music. The R&B song had a smooth, soulful melody. The R&B song had a smooth, soulful melody. They danced to R&B at the nightclub. They danced to R&B at the nightclub.
Latin.
She danced to Latin music at the salsa club. She danced to Latin music at the salsa club. The Latin rhythms were infectious and energetic. The Latin rhythms were infectious and energetic. They learned to dance to Latin music styles. They learned to dance to Latin music styles.
World music.
She explored world music from different cultures. She explored world music from different cultures. The World Music Festival featured artists from many countries. The World Music Festival featured artists from many countries. They discovered new sounds through world music. They discovered new sounds through world music.
Indie.
She listened to indie music from independent artists. She listened to indie music from independent artists. The indie band released their album independently. The indie band released their album independently. They discovered new indie artists at the music festival. They discovered new indie artists at the music festival.
Alternative.
She preferred alternative rock to mainstream pop. She preferred alternative rock to mainstream pop. The alternative music scene was vibrant and diverse. The alternative music scene was vibrant and diverse. They listened to alternative music on the radio station. They listened to alternative music on the radio station.
Sitar.
She learned to play the sitar during her trip to India. She learned to play the sitar during her trip to India. The sitar produced a distinctive, resonant sound. The sitar produced a distinctive, resonant sound. They listened to traditional Indian music featuring the sitar. They listened to traditional Indian music featuring the sitar.
Mandolin.
She played the mandolin in the folk music group. She played the mandolin in the folk music group. The mandolin had a bright, crisp sound. The mandolin had a bright, crisp sound. They used the mandolin to add texture to the music. They used the mandolin to add texture to the music.
Bagpipes.
She heard the bagpipes at the Scottish festival. She heard the bagpipes at the Scottish festival. The bagpipes created a powerful, emotional sound. The bagpipes created a powerful, emotional sound. They watched the bagpipes player march in the parade. They watched the bagpipes player march in the parade.
Disco.
She danced to disco music at the 1970s themed party. She danced to disco music at the 1970s themed party. The disco era popular in the late 1970s. The disco era popular in the late 1970s. They listened to classic disco hits from that era. They listened to classic disco hits from that era.
Keyboard.
She played the keyboard in the pop band. She played the keyboard in the pop band. The keyboard had many different sounds and effects. The keyboard had many different sounds and effects. They used the keyboard to create atmospheric sounds. They used the keyboard to create atmospheric sounds.
Synthesizer.
She used a synthesizer to create electronic sounds. She used a synthesizer to create electronic sounds. The synthesizer allowed her to experiment with different tones. The synthesizer allowed her to experiment with different tones. They programmed the synthesizer to produce unique sounds. They programmed the synthesizer to produce unique sounds.
Drum kit.
She assembled her drum kit on stage before the concert. She assembled her drum kit on stage before the concert. The drum kit included snare, bass, and cymbals. The drum kit included snare, bass, and cymbals. They practiced on the drum kit every afternoon. They practiced on the drum kit every afternoon.
Snare drum.
She played the snare drum in the marching band. She played the snare drum in the marching band. The snare drum provided a sharp, crisp sound. The snare drum provided a sharp, crisp sound. They tightened the snare drum for a better sound. They tightened the snare drum for a better sound.
Bass drum.
She struck the bass drum with a large mallet. She struck the bass drum with a large mallet. The bass drum produced deep, resonant beats. The bass drum produced deep, resonant beats. They felt the bass drum vibrations through the floor. They felt the bass drum vibrations through the floor.
Triangle.
She struck the triangle with a metal beater. She struck the triangle with a metal beater. The triangle added a bright, metallic sound to the music. The triangle added a bright, metallic sound to the music. They used the triangle sparingly for accent notes. They used the triangle sparingly for accent notes.
Castanets.
The cello produced deep, resonant sounds. The cello produced deep, resonant sounds. The castanets created a rhythmic clicking sound. The castanets created a rhythmic clicking sound. They used castanets to accompany the Spanish music. They used castanets to accompany the Spanish music.
Gong.
She struck the gong to signal the beginning of the ceremony. She struck the gong to signal the beginning of the ceremony. The gong produced a deep, reverberating sound. The gong produced a deep, reverberating sound. They used the gong for dramatic effect in the composition. They used the gong for dramatic effect in the composition.
Timpani.
She played the timpani in the symphony orchestra. She played the timpani in the symphony orchestra. The timpani were tuned to specific pitches. The timpani were tuned to specific pitches. They used mallets to strike the timpani. They used mallets to strike the timpani.
Piccolo.
She played the piccolo in the marching band. She played the piccolo in the marching band. The piccolo produced high-pitched, piercing notes. The piccolo produced high-pitched, piercing notes. They used the piccolo to add brightness to the music. They used the piccolo to add brightness to the music.
Bass clarinet.
She played the bass clarinet in the orchestra. She played the bass clarinet in the orchestra. The bass clarinet produced deep, rich tones. The bass clarinet produced deep, rich tones. They used the bass clarinet to add depth to the woodwind section. They used the bass clarinet to add depth to the woodwind section.
French horn.
She played the French horn in the brass section. She played the French horn in the brass section. The French horn had a warm, mellow sound. The French horn had a warm, mellow sound. They featured the French horn in a beautiful solo. They featured the French horn in a beautiful solo.
Euphonium.
She played the euphonium in the brass band. She played the euphonium in the brass band. The euphonium had a rich, mellow tone. The euphonium had a rich, mellow tone. They used the euphonium to provide harmony in the brass section. They used the euphonium to provide harmony in the brass section.
Drum machine.
She used a drum machine to create electronic beats. She used a drum machine to create electronic beats. The drum machine allowed her to program complex rhythms. The drum machine allowed her to program complex rhythms. They produced their track using a drum machine and synthesizer. They produced their track using a drum machine and synthesizer.
Sampler.
She used a sampler to record and play back sounds. She used a sampler to record and play back sounds. The sampler allowed her to create music from recorded samples. The sampler allowed her to create music from recorded samples. They used the sampler to incorporate real-world sounds into their music. They used the sampler to incorporate real-world sounds into their music.
DJ.
She worked as a DJ at the local nightclub. She worked as a DJ at the local nightclub. The DJ mixed different tracks seamlessly. The DJ mixed different tracks seamlessly. They hired a DJ for their wedding reception. They hired a DJ for their wedding reception.
Groove.
She loved the groove of the funk song. She loved the groove of the funk song. The groove made everyone want to dance. The groove made everyone want to dance. They found the perfect groove for their new track. They found the perfect groove for their new track.
Beat.
She tapped her foot to the beat of the music. She tapped her foot to the beat of the music. The beat was steady and easy to follow. The beat was steady and easy to follow. They clapped along to the beat during the song. They clapped along to the beat during the song.
Rhythm.
She had a natural sense of rhythm. She had a natural sense of rhythm. The rhythm of the song was complex and syncopated. The rhythm of the song was complex and syncopated. They practiced keeping the rhythm steady during practice. They practiced keeping the rhythm steady during practice.
To strum.
She learned to strum the guitar chords. She learned to strum the guitar chords. They strummed the ukulele gently around the campfire. They strummed the ukulele gently around the campfire. We need to strum more softly for this song. We need to strum more softly for this song.
To pick.
She learned to pick individual strings on the guitar. She learned to pick individual strings on the guitar. They picked the melody on the mandolin. They picked the melody on the mandolin. We can pick the notes or strum the chords. We can pick the notes or strum the chords.
To blow.
She learned to blow into the trumpet correctly. She learned to blow into the trumpet correctly. They blew into the harmonica to create different notes. They blew into the harmonica to create different notes. We need to blow harder to get a louder sound. We need to blow harder to get a louder sound.
To pluck.
She learned to pluck the strings of the harp. She learned to pluck the strings of the harp. They plucked the guitar strings with their fingers. They plucked the guitar strings with their fingers. We can pluck the strings or use a pick. We can pluck the strings or use a pick.
To bow.
She learned to bow the violin strings smoothly. She learned to bow the violin strings smoothly. They bowed the cello with long, flowing strokes. They bowed the cello with long, flowing strokes. We need to bow more gently for this passage. We need to bow more gently for this passage.
To strike.
She learned to strike the drum with the correct technique. She learned to strike the drum with the correct technique. They struck the cymbals at the climax of the song. They struck the cymbals at the climax of the song. We need to strike the keys more firmly on the piano. We need to strike the keys more firmly on the piano.
To tap.
She learned to tap the tambourine rhythmically. She learned to tap the tambourine rhythmically. They tapped their feet to keep time with the music. They tapped their feet to keep time with the music. We can tap the triangle gently for a softer sound. We can tap the triangle gently for a softer sound.
To slide.
She learned to slide her fingers along the guitar neck. She learned to slide her fingers along the guitar neck. They slid the trombone slide to change the pitch. They slid the trombone slide to change the pitch. We can slide between notes for a smooth transition. We can slide between notes for a smooth transition.
To tune.
She learned to tune her guitar before every practice session. She learned to tune her guitar before every practice session. They tuned the piano regularly to keep it in perfect pitch. They tuned the piano regularly to keep it in perfect pitch. We need to tune the violin before the performance. We need to tune the violin before the performance.
To practice.
She practiced the piano for an hour every day. She practiced the piano for an hour every day. They practiced their scales to improve their technique. They practiced their scales to improve their technique. We should practice this piece more slowly first. We should practice this piece more slowly first.
To perform.
She was nervous before she had to perform in front of the audience. She was nervous before she had to perform in front of the audience. They performed their new song at the music festival. They performed their new song at the music festival. We will perform 3 pieces in the concert. We will perform 3 pieces in the concert.
To improvise.
She learned to improvise during jazz performances. She learned to improvise during jazz performances. They improvised a beautiful melody on the spot. They improvised a beautiful melody on the spot. We can improvise over the chord progression. We can improvise over the chord progression.
To solo.
She took a solo during the jazz piece. She took a solo during the jazz piece. They soloed on the guitar while the band played the rhythm. They soloed on the guitar while the band played the rhythm. We each get to solo for 8 bars. We each get to solo for 8 bars.
Tempo.
She set a fast tempo for the energetic piece. She set a fast tempo for the energetic piece. The tempo slowed down for the emotional section. The tempo slowed down for the emotional section. They practiced the piece at a slower tempo first. They practiced the piece at a slower tempo first.
Pitch.
She had perfect pitch and could identify any note. She had perfect pitch and could identify any note. The pitch of the note was slightly flat. The pitch of the note was slightly flat. They adjusted the pitch by tightening the string. They adjusted the pitch by tightening the string.
Tone.
She worked on improving the tone of her violin playing. She worked on improving the tone of her violin playing. The tone of the guitar was warm and mellow. The tone of the guitar was warm and mellow. They adjusted the amplifier to get the right tone. They adjusted the amplifier to get the right tone.
Melody.
She played the main melody on the flute. She played the main melody on the flute. The melody was catchy and easy to remember. The melody was catchy and easy to remember. They hummed the melody while walking home. They hummed the melody while walking home.
Harmony.
She sang the harmony part while her friend sang the melody. She sang the harmony part while her friend sang the melody. The harmony between the instruments was beautiful. The harmony between the instruments was beautiful. They learned about harmony in their music theory class. They learned about harmony in their music theory class.
Chord.
She learned to play the basic guitar chords. She learned to play the basic guitar chords. The chord progression created a sense of tension and release. The chord progression created a sense of tension and release. They strummed the chord together in perfect timing. They strummed the chord together in perfect timing.
Note.
She played each note with precision and care. She played each note with precision and care. The note was held for 4 beats. The note was held for 4 beats. They read the musical notes from the sheet music. They read the musical notes from the sheet music.
Scale.
She practiced the major scale every morning. She practiced the major scale every morning. The scale helped improve her finger dexterity. The scale helped improve her finger dexterity. They learned different scales for different musical styles. They learned different scales for different musical styles.
Fret.
She pressed her finger on the 3rd fret of the guitar. She pressed her finger on the 3rd fret of the guitar. The fret was slightly worn from years of playing. The fret was slightly worn from years of playing. They moved their finger to a different fret to change the note. They moved their finger to a different fret to change the note.
String.
She replaced the broken string on her violin. She replaced the broken string on her violin. The string snapped during the performance. The string snapped during the performance. They tuned each string carefully before playing. They tuned each string carefully before playing.
Key.
She pressed the key gently to produce a soft sound. She pressed the key gently to produce a soft sound. The key was stuck and wouldn't respond. The key was stuck and wouldn't respond. They practiced playing different keys on the piano. They practiced playing different keys on the piano.
Valve.
She pressed the valve on the trumpet to change the note. She pressed the valve on the trumpet to change the note. The valve needed oiling to work smoothly. The valve needed oiling to work smoothly. They learned which valves to press for each note. They learned which valves to press for each note.
Reed.
She replaced the reed on her clarinet before the concert. She replaced the reed on her clarinet before the concert. The reed was too hard and made the sound harsh. The reed was too hard and made the sound harsh. They soaked the reed in water before playing. They soaked the reed in water before playing.
Amplifier.
She plugged her guitar into the amplifier. She plugged her guitar into the amplifier. The amplifier made the sound much louder. The amplifier made the sound much louder. They adjusted the amplifier settings for the best sound. They adjusted the amplifier settings for the best sound.
Microphone.
She sang into the microphone during the performance. She sang into the microphone during the performance. The microphone picked up every nuance of her voice. The microphone picked up every nuance of her voice. They set up the microphone stand before the concert. They set up the microphone stand before the concert.
Speaker.
She connected the keyboard to the speaker system. She connected the keyboard to the speaker system. The speaker produced clear, crisp sound. The speaker produced clear, crisp sound. They positioned the speakers for optimal sound distribution. They positioned the speakers for optimal sound distribution.
Crescendo.
The music built to a powerful crescendo. The music built to a powerful crescendo. She played the crescendo with increasing intensity. She played the crescendo with increasing intensity. They reached the crescendo at the climax of the piece. They reached the crescendo at the climax of the piece.
Diminuendo.
The music faded with a gentle diminuendo. The music faded with a gentle diminuendo. She played the diminuendo gradually getting quieter. She played the diminuendo gradually getting quieter. They ended the piece with a soft diminuendo. They ended the piece with a soft diminuendo.
Staccato.
She played the notes in a staccato style, short and detached. She played the notes in a staccato style, short and detached. The staccato passage required precise finger control. The staccato passage required precise finger control. They practiced the staccato technique to improve their articulation. They practiced the staccato technique to improve their articulation.
Legato.
She played the melody in a smooth, legato style. She played the melody in a smooth, legato style. The legato passage flowed seamlessly from note to note. The legato passage flowed seamlessly from note to note. They worked on their legato technique to create connected phrases. They worked on their legato technique to create connected phrases.